Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back. For those of you that were here this morning, we were talking about... I'm making faces at me. Do you want to say? Sorry, I'm trying to do 17 things. So there's now going to be an announcement from the lovely Paula.
Hi, we were going to show a Fibres Southwest film, which was reconnecting fashion to farming and where do your clothes come from. But because the light here is so bad and the screen's not quite big enough, we're not going to do it because it didn't work well yesterday when we showed a screen. So instead, we want to see the film, which is pretty good. You can find it on Southwest England Fibre Shed website. I'm sure that someone somewhere clever will put the link for you to you have the link, yeah. So if you'd like to see it and see what we were going to show you, because it is that reconnecting fashion to farming. So as I said, we're not going to put it up now, so you understand.
Thank you.
So we were going to have, which would have been tremendous, Haldi was going to be here from British Wool, representing British Wool, which I was really keen to happen because it's a key part of British Fibre. Unfortunately, she thought the event was online and not an actual event, so she just texted me to say I haven't got the link to the event. So unfortunately, we won't be able to have someone from British Wool, which is a huge shame. So you just have to do with me. I'm representing 6 people now.
Thank you. What are you going to learn? Okay, well, we'll get started. I won't ask you first. That's fine. Right, so welcome back to the British Fibres panel. So this morning we discussed Indian fibres and Indian production. And 2 years ago, I think it was, we had this same event here, bringing together, collaborating with lots of different people around fibres. And we ended up having a very big discussion about British fibres and the huge numbers of fibres that we worked on in the UK and how we can make amazing products about that, how we downstream that. And at that point, that was all in the light of Brexit happening, and we were trying to think how we could do more things with British fibres. And it kind of opened a whole big discussion. So this panel is to cover off and we get some real experts here to explore all of the issues and positives with British fibres. So first of all, I'm going to ask, there's a huge number of people here, we're going to go through the row and everyone tell us a little bit about themselves, a little bit about their fibres that they work with and their journey, their British fibre journey. So I'm going to start at the other end.
Hi, my name is Allan and the fibre I work with is leather. I am an accessory designer. I graduated 3 years ago from the Royal College of Art in women's wear accessories, and my specialism was to look at leather goods and the lack of traceability I was experiencing with the products I wanted to make. So my journey really started with going back to my home county in Shropshire and trying to work closely with the farmers there to kind of understand where the leather fibre raw material was disappearing into the supply chain and how an intervention could be made to connect more closely designers and and farmers. And that sort of led me through some small collections, working with one sheep and one bullock to try to understand the differences in infrastructure in the UK of tanneries, dependent on type of raw material of skin or hide. And that has led me to work in collaboration with my business partner, Sarah, who can't be here today, to create a value chain working with British farmers and British tanneries to create wholesale leather material for brands and designers to work with and sort of have more of a comprehensive understanding of why leather fibre exists and how it comes to sort of be our shoes or bag, and what considerations we can make then within that, from farm until it gets to feet or handbag.
Hi, my name's Katie Allan and my business is Kranich-Wood. I'm a shepherd and a knitwear designer maker. I've got a flock of about 150 native breed sheep. I'm based in the Cotswolds. And my husband and I also have a herd of 50 native breed cattle. Each year after shearing, my wool clip goes down to the natural fibre company in Cornwall, who spin it into a chunky knitting yarn for me. And then it comes back to my studio at home, where I make a collection of jumpers, hoodies, bobble hats, reformer scarves, things like that. And also I do homewares like blankets and cushions and things. I have sort of two sides to the collection. I have an undyed collection, which uses the natural qualities and colours from the flock. One of them is like a mocha brown. It's quite a multi-tonal colour because the tips of the fibre bleaches in the sun. But deep down it's this really bitter chocolate. So when it spins, it creates this really lovely multi-tonal colour. And then the other colour is like an ecru. So I can use those two natural colours to create quite big patterns and bold designs. And then I also send the ecru colour off to be dyed organically at a dye house in Yorkshire called Paintbox Textiles. So yeah, I started out about 8-9 years ago just wanting to farm, and I was looking at my sheep and I was thinking, okay, so I'm going to produce grass-fed lamb boxes, but what about this wool? Every year there's a whole new fleece there, what am I going to do with that? And lots of the farmers were talking to me about, well, you're going to end up burning it, you're going to end up burying it, or if you're lucky you'll get 30p for it. And I thought, this is crazy. You know, there's got to be a better way, and that's what started the journey. And along the way I've learned an awful lot about textiles, sustainable textiles. I couldn't knit, I couldn't sew, there was such a sewing machine on, and never even heard of a knitting machine at the time. And since then I've done an A-level in textile design, and then went on and did an MA in fashion and textiles at Bath Spa, which I graduated from at the beginning of the year, and launched my first sort of full knitwear collection. And it's just, yeah, people are really interested in the story and the provenance of the products. The supply chain's like really small. It's me and the mill, and that's about it. So there's accountability there at every stage. With all the products I sell, there's a QR code that comes with it, and it tells people where the sheep was when it was sheared, who sheared it, the date it went to the mill, the date it came back from the mill, to make the jumper, all the processes that were involved, if it was dyed, how it was dyed. You know, so there's real accountability and traceability there. And I'm really passionate about regional textiles as well. I'm a member of the South West England Fibre Shed, and my undyed collection is accredited through their scheme as well. So yeah, that's me.
Hi, my name is Rosie Bristow. So the project that I'm working on at the moment is growing a field of flax and then going through all the different processes to create yarn and apart from it, I hope eventually clothing. So my background is actually in costume design for theatre, but obviously during lockdown I was suddenly very unemployed and started volunteering on a vegetable farm. And I read the book Fibre Shed while I was there and got completely inspired and quite obsessed about the connection between farming and clothing. And I really wanted to explore if it was possible to set up something in the UK. And I emailed a lot of the different UK fibre sheds, but I couldn't find anybody that was doing linen, like growing flax linen on a big scale. So I ended up approaching a farmer last year, George Young, at Bobbin Farms, and he really kindly offered to grow a whole hectare of flax for me as a trial crop free of charge if I bought the seeds and recruited enough people to hand harvest it. So we just brought in the harvest a couple of weeks ago, and I'm now in the process of making the machinery to actually process it into yarn, which is super exciting. And yeah, it's a really fun project. So I'm excited to see where it goes next.
I'm Phoebe. Some of you would have seen me earlier talking about Pico and our work with mainly cotton, but for years and since we started Pico, we always wanted to work with UK fibres as well and be able to produce an essential product which was made by purely UK fibres, and a lot of the issues we were coming up against was the fact there wasn't medium scale production in place. And I wanted to learn more about the wool industry, had done a bit of shepherding in the past and went on to work at Fernhill Farm as a shepherd. They're really pioneering, like Katie would use, like breeding sheep for their really quality fibre. And so I did a year of shepherding there part-time, and then continued this kind of passion of wanting to work with UK fibres and not quite knowing what way we were going to do it. But we've just started collaborating in the last year to produce the Slipper project, which is a kit to teach you traditional shoemaking skills and make a slipper from fibres and materials solely from the southwest of the UK. We're working with Allan and Sarah, and so we've got leather from pasture farms in the southwest being tanned in Bristow. Really excited about, and a lot of these things that have been coming up with this project is that, you know, it's something that hasn't been done for such a long time and hasn't been possible in these, we haven't had the industries, and so it feels like really, really exciting. We're working with Flax from Stroud, which is hand spun and grown and harvested by Simon and Anne at Flaxland, and at Flaxland makes it always sound quite like it's this big place. They're these two wonderful inventors and farmers, and yeah, it's very inspiring working with them. And then we're working with fleece and felt from Fernhill Farm in the Mendix. So really trying to connect people back to the raw materials, and by empowering them to sew it themselves and really feel those raw materials. And we've got beeswax from Bristow, and yeah, it's over there and on display if anyone wants to come see it. And yeah, I feel like I'm kind of representing the brand side of a lot of these makers and yeah, wholesalers and producers here. So yeah, that's me.
Hi there, my name's Allan Brown, and I work with Nettles, producing fabric and yarn from just regular forage spinning nettles. Before, it was just idle curiosity that got out of hand, really. I didn't have any background in textiles at all, so I've had to learn spinning and weaving and dyeing in order to just take the project forward. Nettle is elsewhere in Nettle's big family. There are extant nettle producing cultures in Nagaland, Nepal, Kenya as well. Nettle is such a widespread plant, and it does have quite unique properties. It's never really made it into mainstream textile production. There's hints of it being used in the past, certainly in the very distant past. Nettle was used. But yeah, the potential of nettle is huge. It's one of these textile crops which, I mean, obviously to upscale it, to take it to market, you couldn't just done and foraged small scale net production. But the potential for fibre is massive. It's obviously a hugely wildlife friendly plant. Lots of insects and butterflies use nettle. Various models are being explored at the moment by different people, whether nettles can be used as a crop to turn heavily farmed and pesticide and artificial fertilizer, turning that back into more natural meadowland that you can use nettles possibly as a crop, because it's a hungry plant and it soaks up a lot of environmental damage. So, and the fibre itself is flax-like, but it's I don't know whether it's unique to nettle, but it has a hollow fibre, and that obviously gives it sort of potential of being quite thermo-regulating and that sort of thing. And I've got some nettle stuff at experimentations in the first big bit of cloth just over there, so do come and have a look afterwards.
Hi, my name's Harriet. I'm studying BA Fashion Knitwear and Business Textiles at Trent University, and I also manage a natural dye garden there. So I'm really interested in learning about the production of natural dyes and using British wool. I've just come off a placement year. I spent 2 months at Fletcher-Gilhuys farm in Somerset, and I was learning about shearing and wool handling, and I'm a hand spinner, so I learned how to spin all of the fibres myself, so now I'm spinning my own yarns for a final year. And to be honest, it's really shocked me that so many students don't understand the relationship between farming and fashion, and how it's so important to understand where the fibres actually come from. It's so easy to go and sort of select a curve of yarn and not really think about, how the sheep treated, where does the wool come from, and these are simple questions that we should all be able to answer. And that's something that I'm trying to explore with my research and the placements that I've done, and to hopefully to be able to produce a final collection that is fully traceable back to the fields and back to the sheep, and then to be able to produce my own natural dyes from that is something that I'm aiming towards.
Hi, I'm Paula, as you know, and I've got another hat on now. I'm representing South West England Fibre Shed, and I will tell you a little bit about that in a minute. I'm also a farmer. I've been a farmer for a great many years, and I've always farmed in what is now called a regenerative, sustainable way. I'm passionate about land use and health of soil. I'm also passionate about my animals. I've done a lot of research on non-verbal communication in domesticated stock. And my passion for fibres, I was taught to spin and weave by a wonderful elderly woman when I was in my 20s. And I've always used the wool, and I can remember going into her house, and this is when everything had become terribly technical. And the smell of wool, I think, really resonated with me. And so it's the touch, the texture, the smell, the story behind wool as a fibre, how the sheep were kept, because again, sheep get very stressed, and when they've had a lamb, you can see the wool break in their fleeces. If they have been starved, you can see again the fleece, it comes through in the fleece. So an animal that has been grazed in a holistic way, has had a diverse pasture, is on pastures that are looked after and have healthy soil and iron in the soil, it makes a huge difference to the result of the fibre. And it's the same with your growing plants as well. With flax, flax again is an amazing carbon, it soaks up carbon, so it's a carbon sink because it goes very deep into the soils, and so is hemp, and so are nettles, as you were saying. Also with nettles, as Allan was saying, it's very good for insects, and you get a huge diversity of insects on nettles. So I'm always looking to see how I can learn more, how I can take my farm forward, and in a way that at this present moment in time is incredibly important. Climate crisis is there, it's on our head. And how do we look to managing our land for the future? How do we look to grow food at the same time sustain the whole of that biodiversity and that nature? And my husband is an ecologist and a dipterist. a dipterist, as you probably know, is someone who's interested in insects. He's particularly interested in flies, and that is the lowest denominator. If you start to get rid of that right at the bottom of the food chain, and you're getting things that go extinct, you know that you've got a problem further up the food chain. So I'm also here as Fibre Shed representative, so we're working very much with looking at wonderful practices in the Southwest, who Katie has just told you, and I have to say she just won a prize as well for her work, so she's done incredibly well. And we're also looking at soil-to-soil economies. We're looking at how we can, again, connect fashion to farming, and so that people have much more knowledge that you need a healthy world to actually grow healthy fibre.
It's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? I mean, I feel so blessed that we have such a wide array of talent and different fibres to talk about here, and we haven't even got all that long to cover it all. It's such a shame. So I'll shut up. But yes, I mean, the fact that it's so environmentally friendly and not plastic. Those of you who earlier heard my anti-plastic rant. So the next question, really, we'll go from the other way this time. So, for instance, Paula. What are the barriers that we face in taking British fibre products and making them available to all? And how can we overcome those barriers? So that's a nice small question for you.
This is something I've been working on for a long time, because I had a project called One Cup Full. I was the chair of the Whiteface Dartmoor Sheep Breeders Association, and they wanted a project to celebrate their 60th anniversary. And I went out and about. I was looking at the lack of passion for British wool and how it was worthless. I was also looking at communities that came under risk because of those communities that were solely focused around sheep, like on Dartmoor, for example. And I was also thinking that this is a huge education thing. I know all this stuff, and my bubble knows all this stuff, but most of the people out there in the Great British public don't know all this stuff. So how can you go out there and how can you give these people a good experience? So again, this was a huge learning curve. I had a shepherd's hut, and it looked like a shepherd's hut, apart from the fact it was bright orange and had One Cup Full on it. And then I had 2 domes, blow-up domes, and I took artisans with me who did pop-up shops. But the whole thing was, inside the hut we had a fully immersive experience, which showed the journey of this community in Dartmoor and the sheep and the importance that they play. And what I was trying to do was to stop people in their tracks. So they weren't the slightest interested in wool or where it had come from, but the sheer surprisingness of a bright orange hut in the middle of a town caused them to stop. So they would stop, and then we would have the conversation. And so I think one of the things about British Fibre is education. I think that's one of the things that I found was really lacking. There wasn't enough information out there for people to understand what an important part of our heritage it is. Like every village and small town used to have a mill. They used to have rope-making facilities. They used to have tanneries. And again, I know that lots of people balk at the thought of eating meat, but even with environmental farms and environmental places, you do need grazing to happen on them. And so there is, you do have to take surplus of that. But my main thing was that if an animal dies for you, you should use 100% of that animal. You shouldn't waste anything. So you should be using every bit of it, which is what Alice did for her project. You can make buttons out of the bone, you can do things with the sinew. So, I mean, we've got an amazing, talented panel here who have really experienced and gone through things that And so the next thing is why we're failing with British Fibres is that infrastructure. We have artisan mills, we have artisan works, and then we have the huge Bradford mills or tanneries that are not actually even in this country anymore. So that mid-level infrastructure is totally missing. And also we're now losing the skills of those people that used to actually work, who had those skills to work with the different things in the mills, in the factories. So we've lost a lot. There is a huge resurgence of interest, and I think that now people can, I mean, for flax and for hemp, for example, I think it's mid-Europe that still holds the candle up to processes, and we can still go out there and learn from them. But it is getting quite, it's getting quite dire, really. We need to do it now, a bit like climate change. You know, climate isn't just changing; it's changed, and so we actually need to do things now. So I think for me, the two things that hold people back is education, is reconnecting people with not just where their fibre comes from, but the importance of the soil that grows their fibre, whatever it is. And I think it's that mid-level infrastructure.
I totally follow on from what you were saying there about education and infrastructure. I'm coming from a different angle, being at this sort of university setting, but this is something that's not talked about when you're studying a degree. I mean, I'm doing a specific knitwear degree, and I think it would be talked about, but it's not. I think we need to start having conversations. People need to understand the importance of British wool, and that we need to stop importing wool, such as merino. Lots of interesting things that I learned when I was at Fernhill, which really, really saddened me actually, was there's such a low value that British wool currently has. You know, with the COVID pandemic at the moment, fleeces are worth about sort of 13 pence a kilo, which is 13 pence a sheep. So they're not even sort of, they're at a loss once they've paid their shearers. So first of all, we need to tackle that. That would come under infrastructure. And then we need to start having conversations about some people, you know, they're starting to sort of understand. Because I think unless you're in sort of textiles, fashion movement, you're all completely unaware that this is actually happening. And why is it not talked about more? So I think if we can start to sort of tackle that, then we can, as students, we are the platform, we're the next generation, then we can start to make those changes and start to think about how we can be designing in a better and more efficient way.
Yeah, nettle, as it currently stands, is such a niche fibre that there isn't really any sort of existing model to sort of expand on. I guess Rosie will cover flax, and I think nettle is sort of a bit behind, but it's facing a similar thing. It's just that intermediate production methods, which you know, when synthetic fibre started to come in, the flax industry just sort of collapsed in a matter of years. And scales of economy and stuff, there's just this whole missing run in how to sort of up it from very individual hand-produced level to something that's got more realistic ability to sort of reach out and be more available to others. But even in, I have found with nettles, maybe there's almost a bit of a fairy tale quality to it, the idea that you can change something. I mean, I tagged it nettles that like fibre of the land. It's like if you want to produce something by hand immediately, you don't have sheep, you don't have land to grow flax. Nettles is like it's the one thing that you can just go to immediately. And I mean, I've always had an allotment of training in permaculture, and I've always been on the food growing tip, but it was only when I started exploring nettle that I suddenly made the connection between the two. mainly because nettles outgrow everything that I tried to grow in the garden. But it's sort of like a very immediate, interactive kind of way of getting a handle on actually what cloth, how traditional, how valuable cloth actually is. And also by the same measure, it kind of illuminates how far we've drifted from that immediacy where cloth was so valued that it's now cheaper to throw it away because to repair men and that sort of thing. So nettles, off the back of my early explorations, a friend of mine did a little film of me to show the process, which launched a Nettle for Textiles Facebook group, which is now 18,000 strong, people all around the world, because Nettle is such a big ubiquitous plant. And so that's actually a huge level of engagement, I think, for people actually getting hands-on and getting experience of what it actually cloth entails when done by hand. And I think, I just find that very interesting, because in the time that I've been doing it, there does seem to be this sort of growth of awareness of actually all the steps that go into it. So, yeah.
I think I echo, especially what Paula and Harriet were saying about infrastructure and education. I think we've experienced a few barriers when looking at working with UK Fibres. One, which I was talking to Alice about earlier when we were talking to the tannery, Bristol tannery, and they were saying that they literally have had no one ask them for traceable leather for their whole time being there, and that's huge. And they haven't been able to, until Alice had come along and been able to put in these measures and understand the industry more, be able to take people like brands like us coming and say, oh, could we bring you a few hides and then we can trace them. It's like, no way, they're working on margins, they've got a scale, and they can't do that. It takes up a lot of time. And so I think, we're collaborating with Ollie and Lucy for the Slipper Project, who are shoemakers, and they're busy making shoes. They've constantly asked tanneries and people for traceable leather, but they haven't been able to get it, and they don't have the time to necessarily go out and collect hides from all these farms, find a freezer to store them in, and then take them to the tannery when they've got a big bulk, which, if they're working with small, like pasture farms, that's actually quite another whole job that Alice is experiencing. And I also think on the other side of that, with wool, a lot of the time, again, with farmers, they're busy farming, and that, it's amazing that Casey's been able to literally do like the whole process with loopy ewes start to finish. But I think a lot of farmers are busy farming and not concentrating on what happens with that wool, and it's being taken off by the wool board and used predominantly for like carpets. So it's like, we need customers and we need brands to be like, no, we want traceable wool. And it's like chicken and egg. It's like, we need the medium scale industry there to provide that service, because I know when I started out years ago, we were on waiting lists for wool to be scoured that I don't think I've even got a reply about still, like, because there's so many, there are people that want it, and it feels like there's high demand, but there's just not enough. Doing that thing again, isn't it? There's not enough mills and there's not enough infrastructure there. And excitingly, it really feels like in the last year, like even in Dorset, there's now another 2 mills, I think 2 Rivers mills and Ruskin mills that are processing wool. And it's still small scale, but it's a really exciting step in the right direction. And then with my Flax hat on, I guess working with Simon and Anne, in Stroud, we were talking to them, and I mentioned briefly yesterday, like they are now trying to talk to other like flax spinners and people growing flax to be like, okay, what is our value of producing this flax? Because I think a really big issue is a lot of incredible artisans don't value themselves as well, and they will be spinning, but almost as a favour, or not putting the true cost of their time and their skill. And on that. And so we've been constantly saying to Simon, like, you need to up your prices, because we want to do this again. We want this to be commercially viable for you. And now he's talking, and I imagine he's talked to you, Rosie, about like, what is that about, like, what is the cost of us spinning for us, and what is the price, like a market price that is right, because it is very labour intensive and knowledge intensive, and it's all by hand, and to have the medium scale machines, we just don't have them anymore, and that's what Rosie can go on to talk is you're in producing now, is having more of those things available, because we've lost them all. And yeah, so I think there's lots of challenges, but also lots of exciting new projects.
Yeah, so that's a great introduction to what I'm going to talk about. So yeah, I think the main barrier to making flax available to lots of people is machinery. So I'm working with Simon from Flaxland and with Soma, who was on the panel this morning, and we're looking at trying to create sort of small to medium scale processing equipment which will take the flax from being a plant in the ground and transform it into yarn. And currently the only options for doing that are either hand processing it, which is incredibly long and very slow, or posting it off to Belgium to get scutched, and then Eastern Europe to get spun, or to China to get spun. And obviously if you're posting it around the world, that kind of removes the whole point of it being like an eco-friendly, locally produced item. So yeah, I'm working on a project at the moment to try and create that sort of technology which can process it so it's not like a really long-winded hand process, which is really exciting. And I guess at the moment the kind of machines we're making are quite DIY, but I'm hoping that there'll be more of a like proof of concept, and then next year, once we've got them up and running, we'll be able to use them to do some like big fundraising to try and get more professional ones, not just ones that I like make on the farm in the shed scale of things. I think the other main barrier is cost, because even with the machinery that we're going to make, it's still going to have a huge amount of human hours of work that goes into it. And I think we're so used to, with the modern fashion industry, taking advantage of people overseas who are getting paid much less than what we consider working, your national average wage or whatever that we get in the UK. And I think if you make a fabric that's 100% produced in Britain, it's going to be like £100 a metre, or maybe even more. And I've heard some interesting ideas. There's a place in Canada, Taproot Fibre Lab, who had a CSA, which is community supported agriculture, which is normally done for veg boxes, but they did a CSA for clothing. So you pay like monthly instalments and you get like a share of the fibre crop, which I thought was really interesting. And I don't really have the answer myself, but I think it would be great to do some thinking about how we can make it be more than just a luxury product, because obviously whilst that's really nice, it's not really giving it sort of its full availability to the whole population.
Right, so barriers to why we don't see more British wool products. I think I hear there's two things I hear a lot of. I hear, well, isn't British wool just good for carpets and insulation? We have over 70 different breeds of sheep in this country. We have the widest wool clip anywhere in the world. And every single breed of sheep produces a different type of fleece. Some of them are, yes, great for carpet and insulation, but there's also a lot of those breeds that are good for a whole variety of uses and produce really lovely wool that you can use for garments and fashion accessories. It's just a myth, and it's really frustrating, and it's one I hear a lot in the farming industry and from the British Wool Marketing Board as well. The British Wool Marketing Board do a very good job in a very difficult situation. I think one of the biggest challenges for wool is competition from synthetic fibres. I think people have got used to the feel of and performance of synthetic fibres, but wool has a lot of natural properties that can challenge a lot of that. I think brands are a bit lazy about using natural fibres. I think a lot of the responsibility has got to come from businesses making better choices about what fibres they're using and where they're sourcing them from. You see all sorts of companies using recycled polyester as ocean plastics is the new thing, and it's just a damaging cycle of using plastics and washing plastics and shedding plastics. And we have this massive resource in this country of British wool that we're not fully utilising. And I think it's definitely getting better. British Wool have recently launched a new programme for duvets and mattresses for traceability right back to the farm. So you can buy a mattress and they can tell you what farm it's come from. And there's no reason that you can't do that with a jumper. You can do it with a fibre and mattress or a duvet. But it's got to come from the brands. They've got to push for it. They've got to ask for it. And as consumers, we all have to ask the same question as well and push for it. I think also farmers grow what people want to buy. They're businesses. So if there is a demand for fine fibre and they're going to get paid a fair price for that fibre, then they will grow it. But while wool is a financial burden, which it is, the money that they get, it's actually bounced back. The price of wool, it's about just under 80p at the moment. That's a good price, believe it or not. That's what they're getting for a fleece. Maybe a bit more if it's a bit cheap, but either way, it's why bother? It costs that more than that to shear it and to have a wool handler sort it and roll it and pack it. That doesn't include the fact that they've spent at least a day gathering all their sheep in, running them through with a team of people, running them through the race, and then they've got to get all that wool to the wool depot. And we're not talking of fling a few bags in the boot of the car. They've probably got to organise a lorry to transport it. These are all costs that aren't covered. They're not doing it for the money. They're doing it for the welfare of the sheep. So they're not going to endeavour to grow the best fibre they can when it's just a burden and it just costs them a fortune. So there's a lot at play, I think, as to why we don't see more British wool, but I think it really comes down to everybody demanding a little bit better from ourselves and from brands. And one last thing I will say is I see people say, oh, we're launching a British wool jumper. And I think that's great, they're launching a British wool jumper. But I'd like to know how much of that cost of that £150 jumper the farmer's getting, because he's probably getting 20-30p for that British wool jumper.
Okay, I'm going to try and unpack a few different of our barriers in what we're doing, which kind of connects to a lot of the answers so far. So, first of all, my first barrier as a designer wanting to work with traceable British fibre as leather came when I was studying to create a leather accessory collection, which was sort of a part of getting my degree. And as Harriet said, it's sort of something that wasn't encouraged of me to specifically go to look for, but it was something that was encouraged in my course as a cohort of young new designers, what questions we should be asking about our materials and why they exist in the first place, which then comes on to what you were saying about farming practices and systems and the care of grazing animals as a part of the ecosystem. So I really wanted to understand why on earth in the first place I was even going to be working with leather and why this hide or skin existed. And I think that's a really important consideration to make as designers in the materials that we're using. Why does that consideration matter over buying a leather-like material that is a lot cheaper but a lot more anonymous and connected to a lot less people and animals, and maybe also to a world that we are less supportive of helping build an infrastructure. As to Katie's point about what farmer is seeing in terms of hides and skins, they are in many cases a burden to the agricultural system, but maybe not directly for a farmer. A small farmer that may be using a smaller abattoir which is closer, which is really key to having a traceable farming system, can experience the burden of raw materials because they are part of a global commodity supply chain. So if that work crashes, places where there are an abundance are fine, but small producers, more rural, that are a part of a more holistic system are the ones that will feel the added price within their practices. And so that makes it quite difficult to source traceable leather, because throughout the value chain there are different points in which the material you want to work with as a designer and you're asking for gets lost. And as you said, it's not it's very difficult, to Phoebe's point, for a tannery to be asking these things. It's not their job. Their job is to work with the raw material and create something of value and of use, not to look all the way back down to the farm. And as much as it is a young designer's sort of definitely responsibility today to ask those questions, there is a missing gap on why that system isn't in place in the first place. And that comes back down to cost, because it's incredibly expensive to go around things in a much longer way. And who then is going to pay the price? Because if it's to produce something that's incredibly expensive and to a very niche customer, then have you succeeded in just creating something that's a much higher price point and hasn't made a massive amount of difference? So there's lots of barriers, but what we have found is that company engagement or designer engagement from the inception of thinking, well, we have a new way of creating a system where we can tick some of these boxes and try to break some of these barriers, is by having companies like Pico or other designers that we're working with that are invested in working with the material that we want to produce before they've even seen it, mainly because it has a transparency and it has an accountability of why it's there in the first place, who we have worked with, why those hides and skins are in existence, what farming system have they come from, and why is it important to respect and bring the greatest value to these fibres and have meaningful use at the end. So that's been a barrier for us that we have had less trouble with, because there is a lot of interest, but to create traceable leather in the first place, it gets lost in a tannery. We don't have the medium scale technology to be able to keep traceability from a farm to finished leather for the specific hides we're wanting to follow. And so a lot of that for us has been to ask and work very closely with tanneries that are really pro working in a different way and figuring it out with us, but finding where we meet in the middle and how our way of working fits in with them, and it also speaks to their skills and makes the best use of their incredible depth of knowledge, and a really important part, I think, also of British history is of tanning and of local tanneries, and what that connection used to be very close into agriculture. You'd have your farms in close proximity to the local abattoir and butcher, and the tannery would be next door, and all use would be made. And I think that's keeping that information, those connections, and that questioning alive helps to overcome what barriers we have, because we can explain why they're there, how to get through them, and how to help the people on board to make that happen at the same time.
Thank you all so much. That was really interesting. I'm just thinking there's a strong parallel with what you just said, and we were talking about this morning with the Indian fibres and trying to have clusters of farming, spinning, weaving, everything all in the community rather than diversity spread. So it's really interesting how all the different fibres have parallel all the way through. So just to summarise the barriers that I picked up from the panellists, amazing. Education and heritage seems like a really important one. How do we communicate with people, not only about how things are done, but also how it used to be done, how these things used to be part of our communities. And I think a lot of people can look back and understand and feel a bit more of a connection if they understand that we've moved away from something that had been there for hundreds and hundreds, if not longer, years. So that's a key one. Obviously, the standard economic model thing is a big one, isn't it? Economic model in all fibres, all fashion. You've got fast fashion, you've got people expecting, the customer expectation of what a thing is going to cost, what an item is going to cost, as opposed to what it actually costs. And that's not even adding in all of the costs we don't measure to do with carbon and water and all of those kind of things. But especially when you're working with UK fibres and totally in the UK, those costs are going to be higher. As I think Rosie said, but also pointing out that even in the UK we have people undercutting what the national wage is, don't we? We had Boohoo last year was £3 an hour they were paying their staff, it turned out, or something. So we don't want to be pushed down into that model for other kinds of fibres as well. And then we were talking about the lack of machinery, and particularly I picked that up with the flax and the leather. There just isn't the machinery there for the mid-level production, so you've got the totally artisan-based, hand-based work, but then how do you shift that up? I loved what you said, Allan, about nettle being a fibre for all. I think that it's quite unique in a way, that, isn't it? It's not, you don't have to farm anything, you can just go out and find your nettle instead, which is, I think it's a really powerful message for people. Yeah. So yeah, that's the barriers I picked up, and I hope I've got all the ones people said, they're all very important ones. And the next question, of course, is a tricky one. It's how do we create industries and supply chains in the way we've just talked about? Some of this we have covered, but how do we do this without compromising sustainability and traceability? So starting to build up mid-level, starting to use reshape and change the economic model, but keep hold of that sustainability and traceability. Now, does anyone want to go first? Or they just spin it back this way? I'll throw it at Paul and then which is nearest.
I haven't thought about this as just off the top of my head. So let me think as I talk, and please, anyone else, join in. I mean, there's several ways we can look at it. We can look at it from creating small businesses, which I think that Rachel was talking about. There are small businesses that work as capsules together, so that each of those businesses has that traceability, but we're using a bigger machines or whatever we need to, so we've got the bulk behind it. But would that work with wool, because it comes in bales? I'm not 100% sure about that. It could possibly work for flax, because it's not as big an industry at the moment. So you would probably have those certain farms that were good at producing flax. And I must say that George, that is producing the flax for Rosie, he is he comes from a proper big commercial farm that he is turning round and to farm in a totally different way for food. So he supplies podmidods with their pulses. He's got silver pasture and then he's experimenting with cattle, but he has to make that farm work. And I think this is the bottom line of everything. It's all very well if we're talking, I mean, again, we can talk on that roots up. We can look at micro farms, we can look at micro dairies, we can look at pastured beef and lamb on small farms. But I've also seen those small farms saying, actually, we now need to upgrade and get bigger. So it is quite a difficult one. I've also worked with trying to start cooperatives in the UK. And starting cooperatives in the UK has been incredibly difficult. We don't have a cooperative mind, whereas you get people on the continent who are probably actually more tricky in personality than some of the British, but they work really well in cooperatives. So that is a model that doesn't work too well in the UK. But maybe if people had ownership of their own brand, their own business, and could work a way of bringing whatever particular use they had, like if it was processing wool, if it was retting flax, if it was, I don't know, maybe then if people still have their own ownership, but can put it together, that might be a way forward of using machinery, and it might be a way of those people that would be then developing that mid-level infrastructure to think this isn't a lost cause because I'm going to open something like this and then it's all going to fall around my feet because I don't get the throughput. Because remember, in every single mill, whatever it is, processing plant, spinning, whatever we're looking at, there is a certain throughput those industries need to actually make their industry survive, their particular factory survive. So what are we going to do to put that throughput in there so that they survive? So there's so many different elements that we have to look at. But I think possibly this one of ownership, I think there is a huge amount of work being done from roots up at the moment, which is very positive. There's a lot of new people with a lot of energy that are coming in and devising different ways. They've got different ideas. They're looking at things in a different way. And I think that is a great hope for us as well. So I think all you wonderful students, all you wonderful people here that are coming at it and looking at things in a different way, looking at how we maybe even build society in a different way will help, but that's in the future. I think it's, again, those small steps, which if we all do them together, will have an effect. It does take time, and sometimes we do feel that we're banging our head against a brick wall, and we've said this last year, and the year before, and the year before that, and the year before that, and have we moved forward? But I think we actually have moved forward. I think we are moving forward quite rapidly suddenly, and I think once that momentum starts, I'm sure that someone here will have a perfect solution to how we will move forward in a good way. So with that, I will pass over to Harriet.
I agree. It's a lot about sort of, small artisans and working together to support each other. And something that really, really interests me, and I'm writing about at the moment in my dissertation, is natural dyeing on a larger scale. At the moment, it is done in a very sort of artisan way, small scale, which makes it very, very expensive. But why are there not facilities available, where designers can work together and they can share facilities so that they can dye their wool, their garments, and we're all working as a team, sharing our knowledge. And facilities like that are not available, so it's never going to be able to be scaled up if simple facilities like dyeing is not in place, and that comes down to infrastructure and machinery. And again, being a hand spinner, I'm sitting at home spinning my fleeces from fur 20 to 30 hours for about 100 grams of yarn, you know, and that's brilliant and it's wonderful, but we need to think of a way that we can still keep the, you know, the beautiful handmade qualities and nurture the raw materials, but to be able to do it in a way that's realistic and that everyone can enjoy the beautiful fibres, because they should be able to. I mean, everyone should be able to enjoy British wool, but it's just how do we go about it? And I think we all need to work together and put our ideas together and come up with a solid plan as to how we can move forward, I think.
Collaboration, there's always collaboration. I think we have to really think about collaboration.
I'm totally ill-equipped to answer this question. I've got no experience of how the industry works or any of that side of it. But one thing that has crossed my mind recently is, you know, if projections of automation and artificial intelligence goes the way that it's been predicted, you know, one of the things that we're probably going to be dealing with is an excess of human time. And it feels like the very small scale practical hand, it's like you know, the UN said for food production, the most sustainable, most productive model is very small scale hand gardening. You can create a diversity and you can grow vertically in a way that you can't do with monoculture. And also, I mean, it's, you know, you've grown food in your garden and allotment. It doesn't actually work out that much cheaper, if cheaper at all, than buying it from a supermarket. But it feels like you're kind of, the convenience and cheapness has actually robbed you of the experience of actually being in an environment, getting an understanding of how it all works, how the insects work, what, you know. So, and as I've sort of grown aware of the connection between fibre and food growing, you know, I wonder whether there is actually going to be increasing room for just, you know, this doesn't solve that intermediate, which I think still needs to happen. But whether, if it does pan out that we have this excess of time, that just small scale, hands-on production may have its place, because if any of you do spin, it's very, very therapeutic, and it's something that you can. It's very portable. You're using drop spindles. You're not producing lots of it, but the tangible benefits, just on the physical, sort of spiritual level of your hands being occupied in this productive way, I feel like that connects a lot of people, as it did to me, to suddenly evaluating textiles in a completely different way. And I think I'd be far more prepared now to pay more for, now I know what actually goes into it. Whereas before I didn't make that connection. So yeah, that's
Yeah, I guess I follow on from what Paula was saying, really, but I think a big thing is that, again, goes back to like education around value as well, and I think, and then intertwined into that is the demand. And I guess Katie was talking about like farmers will grow what we want, and I've even seen that with like hearing about, you know, George's commercial farm. He's now offering up a space to grow flax, and I've spoken to farmers about growing some finer wool for our underwear potentially in the future that could be made from British wool, and they're like, great, okay, well if you buy the sheep, then I'll do it. But it's not an instant process. To get that fine wool might take really super fine wool might take 20 years, and we don't have the machines necessarily in place to process it at a medium level. We do in a big scale or in an artisan scale, but I think it's complicated, because I think we have to demonstrate that value, and like you said, like things like growing your own food potentially cost more than buying it, but then you realise that it has so much value. And if people are more connected to raw materials, to growing, it's from a school level, from a young level, that then they feel actually really connected to it. And as soon as you try spinning, if you've never tried spinning or you try growing a fibre, you realise how intensive it is, how much time it can take up, and how beautiful and difficult and like amazing it is, the process of learning and years of knowledge. But I think that, and again, coming into that is technology and producing machines on a slightly more medium scale. And I think that is happening. And I think that the resurgence of mills and smaller scale mills happening, the fact that the tanneries have said yes to taking on projects like Alice and Sarah's and having traceable leather, it's like, it is there if we keep asking and we keep brands, designers, producers, farmers all get asked and are asking these questions, and it might not be an instant solution, but I feel like that's what we can do now. And then we bring in legislation which, shows that it's really important to highlight these things. It's really, it's important in schools to be teaching these things for, I don't know, I feel like there's top down from like literally soil to legislation is like everything has to be a really holistic approach and like a sharing economy. Like Paula said, it was hard to have potentially a cooperative model in the UK, but I feel hopeful that there is more of an energy around that. Like we were talking, I was talking to Rosie about having more open source machines, and there is that thing of once you really believe in something, you realise that more people could be doing it. And I was talking to someone earlier about how if you're a small brand, I don't want to be a really big brand, so there's so much space for more brands doing similar stuff to us and working with other cooperatives and other farmers, and it's like, and having that, like, it's great, there's so much space for lots of us, and not being proud to being like, I don't want to be an H&M, I don't want to be a big, huge brand. So it's like creating more of that sharing economy, which I feel hopeful is happening, but whether it's fast enough, I don't know, but we'll try.
I think one of the sort of potential solutions could be, as some of the people have said, it's like having lots of small scale businesses. I think that's how you end up not compromising all of the ideals of like why you want it to be a sustainable producer of like textiles or clothing in the first place. What I would love to do is to have a farm which grows flax, but also maybe has like a dye garden that's growing stuff with the natural dyes, and it has the milling equipment on site, and so everything's sort of very close together. Because I think what I don't want to do is go back to having like huge factories, sort of go back to the Industrial Revolution and have all these incredibly boring jobs where you're like just doing a tiny part of a massive supply chain. And I think that is something I think about quite a lot, is if I did manage to set up my sort of flax project, would anybody actually want to work there? And I'd hope they would, if it was a fascinating enough job, if you're able to see the flax in the field and all of the dye plants growing, and then see the whole process and see it become fabric. And I think that could be something that's like an actually really interesting job to do. And like you were saying about open source, we're hoping that the plans that I'm working on with Simon and with Soma would be able to make them open source, so that other small scale farmers who fancy trying out flax as like a trial crop, there isn't this like huge financial barrier of like, oh, we need to invest like hundreds of thousands of pounds into new equipment to be able to try out growing fibre flax. They can just build it themselves on a more DIY level just to try it out. There's like a really interesting machine on Farm Hack, which is like open source farm equipment, which is like a bicycle powered threshing machine, which is, it's only for like small scale stuff, but it means that like a farmer could try out like a new crop and try threshing it and try baking with it, and without having to like instantly invest loads of money. So I think there's some sort of like interesting solutions like that. I guess an idea would be like create it on a small scale and then help other people to create their own small scale version, like around the country. So rather than sort of saying like, oh, my business is doing really well, I want to become a huge business, I'd more go,
this is working out, I want to help other people open their own small scale business in lots of different places. Yeah. So I think, agree with everybody that small scale artisan production is fantastic. I think it's leading the way. Small micro fashion businesses are leading the way in sustainability. I've obviously spent the last 10 years trying to prove that it can be done, and that and I'm doing it. So I do really passionately believe in all these projects, but I also really feel we have to be realistic about the scale of the problem. By 2030, over 70% of the fibres that are being produced are going to be synthetic, and that is coming from the fossil fuel industry, so oil and gas, and they have a lot of money and a lot of vested interest in pushing those fibres, and we're very small in comparison. So I think without government getting involved, without legislation against these damaging fibres, without people being brave enough to stand up and say, actually, I can't actually believe it's still legal to produce fibres that we know are trashing the ocean. Why is that okay? It's like, I can't get my head around the fact that it's okay to import garments that have been put into the UK and sell them on the UK high street when we know they've been manufactured in working conditions that are illegal in this country. So it's not okay to do it in this country, but it's okay to sell it if it's been done in another country. It's crazy hypocrisy. And until the government gets on board with the crisis and the issue and really does something meaningful about it, I feel like we've got a bit of a battle, uphill battle against some really big giants. And that sounds really depressing, doesn't it? So from a war perspective, we've got the British Wool Marketing Board, who have a massive network of depots, graders. They've got a system in place to collect the wool and redistribute it. So we've actually, I think, from a wool perspective, we've got quite good infrastructure in this country. I'm really gutted that we don't have a representative here from British Wool. And they have demonstrated by launching this new farm gate to duvet mattress range they're doing, that they can do it. So they can do it. They've demonstrated that. They've got facilities there. We just need to make them do it on a bigger scale.
So from our perspective, I guess there's two main barriers for us. One is competing with that customer expectation that the large-scale industries cater to so quickly, both in cost and in feel and expectation of clothing and fashion, and working in a different way, producing in a different way, produces fibres that may be less relatable than they are to our high street. We're so much more accustomed to your polyesters, your nylons, and your acrylics than you are to your Nettle. So I think that's the education part has a really powerful place to play in educating citizens on what they're purchasing, but also taking them on that journey, because it's not going to happen overnight. And for us, in trying to produce a material that can compete, and so that brands can replace their usual supply with us, and our story is we have to be able to produce something that is both price competitive and performance competitive. But we have a whole different set of rules than what they have. They can use a top coat finish that isn't biodegradable, is toxic, has had poor water filtration systems in its creation, and therefore has endless water resistancy and stain resistancy, and you can drop your jam jar on top of anything and give it a wipe and we're grand. And I also think that that expectation of what we wear and how we treat fashion, clothing, and all fashion goods also needs to have a shift in what we need to own and buy and how to look after it, and what our expectation of that purchase relationship. And in terms of our sort of infrastructure and how to make that possible, we've been trying to start from the field up, and so trying to understand where and how to work with farmers, and what do their systems look like, and how do we then integrate ourselves within that to be of a benefit to that, which is really difficult from somebody who come from a studio perspective, where you have your material on your desk and all of the thing you need to know to do is hopefully how to make something beautiful that somebody wants to buy. And so really integrating, trying to learn about a different community that your fibres are coming from, where they are and how the creation of fashion could be of benefit to that farming community, and then how to organise within it. So we're working in a hub-like system, so trying to find regions of farm clusters that we can work with within their sort of supply chain networks and keep traceability of raw materials. But that's a quite difficult way of working, because there's just so many different stakeholders along the way that you need to make small changes within. And it's, I'm just trying to think of positive ways in which we can sort of beat those barriers. I'm like, oh god, yeah, I wake up and think that most days actually. I do think, as Katie said, it's the big corporations we've got to compete against, the challenge, and be a viable replacement. And from that, we've been really fortunate in having a lot of grants brought to have our business even exist, because there are many different fashion companies at the moment who are looking at their natural fibres, and they know that for them to exist as a company, they still need to be able to work with natural fibres, because that is synonymous with their luxury aesthetic. And I think trying to leverage that in a really positive way, that those new systems are being built from the ground up, and we can give them access to it rather than have them dictate where they're getting those materials from, is a really also exciting point of collaboration and education. And unless the UK government would like to put in some lobbying policy, but I think until that sort of collaboration and community from both sides of farming and fashion is good strength.
Couldn't agree more. So, yes, that's an awful lot of information. I hope you've all got that there. I think the key message that I picked up was really we want to be sticking with the artisanal and the smaller hub ways of working, because as we were discussing with Indian Fibres this morning, in a lot of cases machinery can help, and infrastructure, but in order not to lose the transparency and sustainability, we need to keep the hands-on, literally and metaphorically, approach to developing fibres and developing materials. What Katie was saying, I have to completely resonate with, if that's the right word. I said at the end of yesterday, and I'll say the same thing again today, we're all sitting in this room, we've got the power, we can actually go out there and ask some of these questions, be that awkward person at the dinner party, on the Zoom call or whatever, you say, are your clothes made of plastic? Did you know we're facing a time of emergency? Why are you wearing plastic? And by plastic, it's not, they hide it well. It doesn't say plastic on the label, it says viscose, it says acrylic, it says nylon, it says polyester, you know, they're carbon-based materials. And if we can get rid of those, that's going to be an awful lot better for our planet. I also agree with the thing about hypocrisy. We're allowing, you know, these things to be made around the world and sold in the UK, and we're kind of going, yeah, that's fine because it's cheap. It isn't fine because, you know, our planet's in grave danger. Well, actually, like I said yesterday, our planet is not in grave danger. Humanity is in grave danger. The planet will carry on without us quite happily. So, you know, we've got to do something with this. So I would urge the takeaway to this, people in the room, ask the questions, be that awkward bugger in the room, you know. I think it's really important. So yeah, that's that's my take on that one. I think we're kind of running out of time for this panel. I don't know if anyone in the audience has a burning question to ask our experts. What would you like to say?
Question to Paula. You raised the question of all the panelists. Excellent presentation. Question is education to whom? Consumers, government, school, college?
I think all of us. I think we all need to learn and educate. It is a different world out there now. I think there's so much happening. I mean, I feel that I'm constantly on a learning experience at the moment. I don't know the right choices. I don't know what is going to benefit, say, my farm better than something else. I think the governments certainly need to sit up and listen to the rumblings that are happening, or the more than the rumblings that are happening. I think there does have to be legislation in place for certain things. And I look at my, you know, my family, my grandchildren, and even though they live on a farm, the majority of them, they still are quite disconnected to what is going on around them. And I find that's quite weird. You know, so childhood has even changed hugely. And speaking to my sons and my daughters-in-law, again, it's like they're saying, I'm not sure what we're facing. So I think we all need to learn from one another. I think that we definitely need to have open minds. I don't think that anyone who thinks like us at the moment is right or wrong. I think that there is a path that we're forging and we have to walk on. And I think we will learn from one another. Governments, I think, are a bit of a lost cause at the moment. But I think that, again, if everybody starts to take a little bit of notice and a little bit of getting rid of their comfort zone, because a lot of it is, change is really disturbing. It worries people, and people think they're good at change, but even when you speak to little children, they'll say, Manu, that's not how you did it last time. You know, so change for all of us is uncomfortable. And I think that we need to support one another and find a way through. So I think all of us need educating.
I think Joe is ready to fight with UN, which is ununited. But I think we're thinking about citizens' parliament via Brexit. This is the cause. We should get united and try thinking about sort of Gram Sabha in Indian situation. And maybe every village, every city should have a people representation. And they make decision. That's a real democracy.
Yes, which is what we were talking
I'm for
about.
it.
Yes, I think so. Any more?
Okay, then we will. So the other thing to tell you is that there's a community quilting project going on this weekend as well, which I believe is laid out. Laid out over there. So what you're probably asking people what they'd like to do is basically there's some bits of fabric there, go and sew 2 bits together, or maybe 3 bits together, and then you'll be part of a community quilt. That quilt is then going to have a backing put on it and be shown in our roving exhibitions around the country and all sorts of other things. And you'll be part of something. You're using your hand, you're getting in touch with the fibres and the fabrics and contributing to something beautiful. So do go ahead, it's over there, and you can pick up a needle and get sewing.
Not many men are around, but yesterday, to my men, be careful if you're not done, like I never did it, to stitch wrong around.
Be careful, yeah.
Learn from the women and empower them.
I just want to thank all of you for coming for the manage, because it's been fantastic. I know you've come some distance, and I just want to say to all of you, thank you so much. I think it's very valuable, and our future is all in you too. So I just want to say that very much.
Thank you.
Good. Good.